right, you perfect scoops of peanut butter. I need answers.
Hey everyone, this is Peggy. Peggy has a delightful TikTok channel. I love watching her videos. Sometimes she posts very interesting Catholic content. Sometimes she posts silly videos with her husband. Sometimes she has a video where she's having a conversation with an imaginary stuffed goat. Either way, Peggy is definitely worth a like and a follow. However, today Peggy needs answers. So let's see if we can help Peggy find the answers that she needs.
This is something that I've been thinking about for the longest time, but I cannot shorten the question enough for Google. And I don't trust Google with everything. So we see depictions all the time of when Jesus is nailed to the cross. It's through his palm. And we see when he's off of the cross and, resurrected and everything, the nail marks are his palm. But it is physically impossible for a nail through the palm to a cross to hold up his body weight. I'm trying to be respectful here, he would have just flopped down and be held up by his feet being nailed to the cross. But that didn't happen. And I'm about to butcher this, but I had a Bible teacher once who told us that in ancient Hebrew or something, they didn't have a word for wrist. And so the hand was like down to here or something. And so it's very possible that he was nailed through the wrist, and the two bones would have held him up.
Now, Peggy's video is very long, so I'm going to cut it up as much as I can so that this video is not one of my 45-minute YouTube videos. Because since I'm answering a question on TikTok, I'd really like this video to be able to stay on TikTok, so I'm going to keep it under the 10-minute time limit. Peggy is absolutely correct. There is not enough here to hold you to a cross with a nail. That isn't possible. However, right here, there are two bones that are very strong and very sturdy and would have completely held the weight of a grown man up on the cross. So that's probably how they did it. And as for the question as to the Hebrew, let's take a look at what an actual Hebrew scholar has to say on the subject.
Shalom. Welcome to the Biblical Hebrew word of the day. Today's word is yad. And you can see it here up above in the picture, and it's also this thing that I'm holding. This is also called a yad because it's a little hand and a finger that we use for reading from a Torah scroll.
So this is from the YouTube channel Hebrew Literacy. And as you can see from the graphic that he shows and that I've put behind me, the hand does extend to just below the wrist. And that is the Hebrew word yad. And it means hand, and it does encompass the area that would have had these two bones that Jesus probably would have been crucified with had the Romans wanted to do it the most efficient way possible.
If that's the case, then why are all the depictions of him with the nail marks through his palm? Why would it not be through the wrist? Or are there depictions of him with it through the wrist? Or did they have his hands nailed to the cross and then rope around his wrists? And if so, why do that when you can go through the wrist? I need answers.
Now, had they wanted to do it the most painful way possible, they might have tied his hands and then nailed him through his, they might have tied his wrist to the cross and nailed through his hands, because then as his hands slipped from the nail, the rope burns would have hurt him and tortured him even more. Which method they chose, I don't think we will ever probably know. But when you see depictions of Christ in movies being crucified, he's either being crucified through the hand and his arms are being tied to the cross, or he's being crucified through the wrist. I've seen movies and depictions both ways. The bottom line is you should never ever get your theology from movies. But either way, both of these ways would work. And as to which the Romans would have chosen, there's no clear biblical answer. And I don't think that it's really all that important. But if you're really that curious, this is probably wrong. So when you see depictions of Christ with his wound in his palm, it's probably just wrong. Because he would also have had wounds around his wrist from the rope burns. On to the second question.
and my second question that I am very hesitant to ask, but I need answers. So we always see depictions of Jesus on the cross. He has something around his waist. Because, of course, you know. Again, I'm going to ask this as respectfully as I can, but I don't know how to word it exactly. So, we all know that Jesus was stripped of his robes when he was about to be nailed to the cross, right? Did they strip him of just his robes and then give him something around his waist? Or did they go for the full humiliation and have him up there in his birthday suit? And if that's the case, then my question has been answered.
So that little piece of cloth that you see wrapped around Jesus's no-no parts when he's being crucified is called either an ezor or a hagor. This was an ancient undergarment that was worn by ancient Israeli men or Israelite men. And Jesus would have worn this garment under his robes. So it's very possible that the Romans just stripped him of his robes and left his underwear. It's also very possible that they would have stripped him of his drawers too and had him up there humiliated and naked. In fact, it's probably more likely that he was up there humiliated and naked because crucifixion was reserved for the worst people, the worst criminals. Crucifixion wasn't even legal to crucify a Roman citizen. That's why St. Paul was beheaded and not crucified. St. James was crucified. St. Peter was crucified. But St. Paul was beheaded because St. Paul was a Roman citizen, and crucifixion was deemed too humiliating to make even a Roman criminal endure. So, yeah, it's very possible they left his drawers on, but he was probably up there, just flapping in the wind.
But we see him all the time being depicted as something around his waist because, of course, you cannot show that off. That's just, don't do it. I need answers.
So the answer to the last part of your question is pretty simple, and you pretty much answered it yourself. If the Romans did strip Jesus of all of his dignity, as well as all of his clothing, and have him humiliated and naked hanging on the cross, sacred art and movies and just regular depictions of that would include the Azor just for modesty's sake. Just like how depictions of Adam and Eve show them with, branches and leaves covering up the really interesting bits. So I hope this helps, Peggy. I hope this answers all of your questions. And yeah, you're welcome.